Alrighty, so we need to go after the first piece of this color managed puzzle. And yeah. And it's this part right here. So remember I showed you this part up here, our color managed workflow. We are going to start with a camera profile part. So you need a piece of software installed. So if you take a look at this will be on all the computers that are here in the 917 will already have this on it. For everybody else, I've given you the installers. So if you take a look in your class number 2 files, in the student files, for those of you who are on Windows, let me change this over here. It's this thing right here, DNG profile editor underscore window underscore 1 underscore 0 underscore 4.exe. You need to run that and go through your typical Windows installation. Say yes, yes, yes. Give them your firstborn child and $100 million and a pint of blood, and you'll be good. For those on Macintosh, it is DNG underscore profile editor underscore Mac underscore 1 underscore 0 underscore 4.dmg. You need to run that. And then you guys need to tell me when you're finished getting it all run. So if you get this warning that says the developer cannot be verified on Macintosh, look up at my screen, do this with me. Is everybody there who's on Mac? Has everybody gotten to that error message? Yeah, you've got it on there. Okay, so this is how you deal with this. Oh, actually, I just had you install the wrong piece of software. Hit cancel. If you've uninstalled that software, it won't hurt anything. It's just another version. It's actually Adobe's version of it. I don't really like Adobe's version of it as much as I like another one. But so at any rate, if you've gone through that whole install process, you can stop, get out of it. It's a different piece of software we need to install. And it's this one right up here. For the Windows people, it's camera calibration setup.exe. You need to run that one. And then for the Macintosh people, it is color checker camera calibration.pkg. And then if you run into that same security error, let me know. There's an error reading the package. Are the rest of you getting an error? Anybody else? Windows or Mac? Oh, it's already on this. You don't need to install anything on this. The software's already on there. Did this? Yes. What's it say? Another copy off of the hard drive. There may be, when it comes off the server, who knows what it does. What? Again, it's already on these. You don't need to install it. It's on the software is already on the computers here in this room. Did this work for everybody? Oh, all right, sorry. Just watch this, you'll see what's going on. That's actually the application itself. So it went to Okay. Is everybody else okay? Nope. Yeah. Keep it closed. That's just your video. That's what you All right, everybody else? Oh, okay. Whew. How much fun was that? Okay, if you can go to your System 2 folder, Session 2 folder, inside of there is a folder called DNG Custom Profile Example Files. Can you guys find that? If you open that up, inside of that, there are two, well, it depends. I don't know. What do you guys have inside that folder? Do you have 1, 2, or 3 files? One file is just the CR2 file? Okay, I'm going to do the same thing as you guys, so hang on one second. Okay, so simply double click on the CR2 file. It should try to get you into Photoshop. If it tries to take you anywhere else, let me know. It took you to Capture One, so then quit Capture One. Everybody needs to watch this part. I'm going to cancel out of mine just to show you how to fix this problem. So, again, and this is slightly different on Windows than it is on Macintosh. So if you're having an issue with this, typically you want the same program to open the same files all the time. You can control part of that. If you're having an issue with Windows, let me know. We'll figure out how we can do the research and figure out how to fix it. But in a Macintosh world, do this. You need to find the file the CR2 file that just tried to open in the wrong place. Click on it once to make it active. You don't want to double click because that'll launch it. Just click on it once to make it active and then hit Command I. If you cannot remember Command I, go to your File menu and come down to Get Info. It'll do the same exact thing. If you look down at the bottom of the file window that opens up, there is a thing that says Open With in a drop-down menu, and there are a whole range of things. If yours tried to open in Capture One, it says Capture One. You need to change that drop-down menu to Adobe Photoshop 2023. Is everybody good on this? You're not done yet. So then underneath that, there's a button that says Change All, and you want to click on Change All, and that way it will change that behavior for all your CR2 files. Now, if you're a Nikon shooter and you're doing NEF and it's opening up in Preview or it's opening up in Capture One or whatever, it changes the same way. This is how you figure it out. Are we good? Okay. Now when you double click on the CR2 file, it should open up in Camera Raw. Everybody good? Really quickly, is anybody here working on any version of Photoshop before 2022? What version? Does your info, here, let me just see what your Camera Raw looks like. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a DNG of this. DNG is Adobe's version of a raw file. This is the best use for it, is what we're doing right now, but nonetheless, that's what we're going to actually do. To get this to generate a DNG, it is this little box in the very top right-hand corner. It looks like a box with an arrow pointing straight down in it. You need to click on that box. It will open up a Save Options window. Is this working for everyone? Because you're doing that. What we're doing right now is going to be a part of your homework, and you're going to do a bunch of them for your homework. So if you're not getting this, again, I told you in the beginning of this class, you need to holler out and say, Versa, this is not working for me, or no, I am not, my screen does not look like that, or no, whatever. Stop me, okay? All right, to make a DNG out of this, by default, it's actually set up to do one. So if you've never been in this folder, you don't need to change a thing. But basically, we are going to save our DNG to the same location because we want our new DNG to be right next to our CR2. If you wanted to put it someplace else, you could hit Select Folder. We don't want to do that. In the file naming, we're just going to use the document name. It's going to keep the document name, but it's going to add the DNG extension. So we will have a name.cr2 and a name.dng, and that way you know they're the same. They're two different files based on the same raw data. Yes? Say what? So the file extension, you can change this to big DNG or little. I always prefer lower cases, so you don't need to change anything there. And the rest of this, you don't need to worry about any sort of compatibility. You don't need to worry about any of that stuff. You just need to hit the save button. Now, you can do a ton of these at the same time if you want to. So if you loaded a whole bunch of files along the side here, you could select them all and do that same thing, and it would make one after another. But again, it would separate them because they all would have different names. Make sense? All right. We can now hit cancel because it's done its work. What we wanted to do was simply make a DNG. We're going to use it in a minute. But if you go back into your session number 2 folder and look into that DNG custom examples, you should now see a copy of a DNG file that has the exact same name as your CR2 file. Are we good? Okay. Next thing we're going to do is launch the program you just installed. So if you go to your application folder, again, there's 2 different names that they're using. The one for Macintosh is Color Checker Camera Calibration. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the name for the Windows one. The Windows one is just camera calibration. Do the Windows people, can you find that application file that you threw in? Okay, and just launch the program. You should get a warning that comes up and says your display calibration status. Again, this thing expects you to be working in a color calibrated workflow, so that'll throw all sorts of things like, have you calibrated your monitor yet? No, not yet. Well, actually I have, but you all haven't. So did everybody get this window open? Anybody not? Okay, the DNG, let's take a look at the top really quickly here. You want to make sure that you've got DNG on the very top right hand of the screen. You have DNG, dual illuminate DNG, and ICC.TIFF. You want to pick the first of the DNGs. What dual illuminate will do is it'll allow you to take a file. Typically, they look at 2 different color light sources. So you would take a file, for instance, that was shot in daylight, and you would take another file that was shot under tungsten light in a house, and you would put those 2 together. It's a generalized profile. It's not really a great one. I profile every single shooting that I do with a camera and a different lighting situation. So if I go into the studio and I set up a situation, let's say I'm shooting for a week in the studio, it's always the same camera and it's always the same lighting. I build one profile for the whole week. But if I'm doing a different lighting setup for each and every shooting that I'm doing during that week, I do a custom profile for every single one of these. Basically, what we're trying to do is deal with the derivations in your sensor, but those can be impacted by really strong different kinds of light. So for instance, one that you build for daylight is not going to work really great under sodium vapor light that you would have in the middle of the night kind of thing. You would want to do a separate profile for that. Make sense? Okay. So anyway, we're just going to do the DNG illuminate. For those of you who are working in Capture One, who in here is really deep into Capture One? Well, if you are, Capture One does not use DNG profiles. It uses ICC profiles, and that's what this final thing over on the right-hand side is for. You can generate a custom ICC profile to use in Capture One. So if you get to that stage and you want to know how to do that, just let me know and we'll figure out a time to get together. So at any rate, you have 2 options. You can drag and drop that DNG right onto this screen, or if you can't find it or see it or whatever, you can do your file menu down to add image and then just navigate whatever. You need to go find that DNG and you need to drag it on top of that window. So and you should get a thing that says it's loading the image. And it should actually find the color target that's in there. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but that image has one of these color targets in it. This is the Macbeth color checker. This used to be, before X-Rite bought this, it was always called Macbeth. Now they just call it color checker because X-Rite now owns it. But how many people in this room have never seen one of these? How many people in here work with this? Oh, that is a very encouraging sign. All right, so at any rate, you know what this is. So it finds the primary colors that are on the color checker. This color checker is different. You can get some color checkers that are only this one panel, this one right here. They tend to be much larger. You can also get little baby ones. I never understood the little baby one though, because the little baby one is really for people who shoot film. And I'm trying to imagine holding this little baby thing like in a giant film frame that you would never, anyway, it doesn't matter. But at any rate, that's the part that you would use on this, not that part. But it finds it automatically. If for some reason it can't find it, there are tools along the right-hand side that will allow you to reposition something in your frame. You can also, if it's off, because these little squares need to be inside the color patches. They cannot be touching any of the little color edges. You'll see there's chromatic aberration. At least there is, yep, it's in the file. So this little red part up here, you want to avoid all that. You want these little patches to be right in the center. If you click the little plus with the arrow at the sort of the top right-hand side, not the very arrow at the top, but the tool underneath it, it's selected by default. You can click on any of these little green circle corners to actually move this whole grid around to make sure that it's all in the right place. But it usually does a really good job of automatically finding it. Now, before we create this profile, I need you to go back out to your desktop. You need to select the name of the file that we're actually shooting. So the name of this file that we're shooting is 2011-0917_COL_fashion1_01-001. You do not need that 001. That is a frame number, but you need everything else, and you need to copy it. So I'm going to drag across mine, hit Command C, or go up to the Edit menu and come down and just do copy, so that we've got a version of that that's named exactly the way my file that I shot this with is named. And this is how you use multiple profiles for multiple shootings. Your profile is named based on the shooting that you're doing. How many people in here have a consistent file naming convention? And what are the rest of you guys doing? Flowers? Assignment 2? Are you kidding me? Oh, you will hate your life, hate your life, hate your life, hate your life, hate your life. What happens when you get to that millionth photograph? How the fuck do you search that? Oh, I think it said flowers in there. Oh no, I'll sign assignment 1. I'll go for that. Nightmare, 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 nightmare. Somebody shoot me an email really quickly. I'm going to send you my naming convention and why I use it. But basically, my naming convention, can anybody tell me anything about this file? Yes. When? In 2011. Exactly. Can you tell me anything else about this thing? Fashion 1, possibly. That might mean something. Colorado might mean something, or what else? What are the first 3 letters of the school that you all go to? So I not only have when I shot it, I have who I shot it for, and I have a keyword as to what the subject matter is. All in a file name. Oh. Anyway, somebody send me that email and I will send it out to you and we'll talk about it. But nonetheless, okay, so it's copied now. Go back into that software program and hit Create Profile. And you'll see when you do Create Profile, a window comes up and it's going to name it Canon EOS 5D Mark II because that was the camera that shot it. But every single camera has its own unique sensor with its own unique deficiencies and color rendering. So to make this standard generic name is meaningless to me. I don't care what camera I shot it on. I care what the shooting was. Make sense? So you would think you would be able to change this name. You can't. It's a bug in the software, I think, but nonetheless, do this. You need to click and get rid. You want to keep that .dcp. That's the extension for a digital camera profile. Hit the delete key to get rid of that, and then if you hit Command V, you would think it would paste it. It does not. If you come up to the edit menu and say paste, well, there is no edit menu. This has been going on for years with this program. The trick to it is you need to do a right click. So for those of you on Windows, right clicks has existed forever. It's just a right click, you'll get a drop down menu and you can do paste. For those of you on a Macintosh, if you hold down the Control key and click, you will get a drop down menu. Sorry. I was going to say 2-finger click will also do it. This is really not happy with where I'm at. Then you can just put it in. All right. So anyway, 2-finger swipe will also do it on a Mac. It'll give you a drop down, but Control click is what I've always used. So hold down the Control key and click, you'll get a drop down menu and do paste. You need to make sure that that name is followed with a .dcp. Yes? Yeah, if the DCP goes away, just type it in. Okay, everybody pull out their phone. For the Windows people, this will be slightly different, but there is a PDF telling you exactly where this is, because you are going to make 4 of these profiles for 4 different shootings, and the first assignment is to turn these profiles into me. You need to know where they are so you can copy them. And this is where they are. They are on my hard drive in my user group under my username in the user library, application support, Adobe Camera Raw profiles. That's where they are. Again, in the assignment that you read on Canvas, it will give you this path for both Macintosh and for Windows. So just look at the assignment. It'll tell you the path to follow to actually get to where these profiles are. When you get there, you want to copy the profile out. You want to duplicate it and then pull it out. Because if you take the profile out of this folder, you won't be able to use it, which is what you're going to have to do for the next assignment. Is everyone clear on that? So you are going to turn in a copy of this to me, not this one. We good on that? I'll show you how to do that part really quick. Yes?
Would you recommend making an alias of that folder?
No. I mean, you could. Caitlin, I don't, if that's the way you work, there's no reason not to. At any rate, so that's where this thing is going, and then you're simply going to hit save. And it's going to go through this process. Hopefully you're going to get the little bar. This is how you can tell who has the really fast computers and who doesn't. And it says my profile has been successfully made. Applications will now be able to use it. However, if you've got Photoshop running right now, Photoshop can't use it right now. You need to restart Photoshop. So anyway, I'm going to say okay to this. I'm going to quit this program. And then I'm going to show you where this is on a Macintosh. So again, I have copied a copy of my user library to my favorites. If you didn't do that last week, go up to your Go menu, click on it, hold down either the Shift key or the Option key, and you will get the library right here. Click on Library, and then click on the word Library at the very top. Grab that folder and drag it over down into your favorites and let go. And that way you'll always have a quick icon that will get you to your user library. Now, in the Macintosh world, there's multiple libraries. Just to show you what I mean, I'm going to double click on my hard drive. Under just the hard drive root, there is a library. That is not the user library. Under Systems, there is another library that is also not the user library. The library is in the user group inside of my user part, and it's now hidden in here, and that's why you need to use that trick to go find it. But at any rate, once you do get to the library, you come down to Application Support, then to Adobe, then to Camera Raw, then to Camera Profiles, and it's sitting right in here. The one I just made is this one right here. To copy this without removing it, click on it, drag it to your desktop. Before you let go, hold down your Option key and you will get this little plus symbol. And then let go. It will make a copy of it there, and it will leave the original where it is so that you can actually work with it. If you've done all that, I'm going to quit Photoshop and then restart it really quickly. I am then going to go back to my original CR2 file. So go back to your session 2. Inside that DNG custom profile example files. The DNG right now, I want you to throw this away, and there's a reason for this. We are actually going to leverage the DNG to be our base file from now on. You can't do it with this one. This one is now baked with a different profile in it. We need to make a version of this DNG that's got our new custom profile in it. So throw this one that you used to make it, throw that guy away. You don't want to use him at all. Like I said, we're going to make a different one. And then double click on the CR2 file to launch it. It will actually come into Camera Raw. And this used to be, profiles used to be an afterthought for the most part, and they were buried really deep in the palettes of this. They are so important right now. It is damn near the first thing that you do. You can do an auto balance, which is exposure on the image, or turn it into black and white. Those are the only things that you can do before you get to the profile that we're going to actually work with. Now, a lot of you have worked with this. It's very similar to the layout that happens in Lightroom. So you can do this in Lightroom. These profiles work in Lightroom the exact same way they'll work here. But the way that you should think about this is that this is actually going to work from the top down. This is how we're supposed to be working in this. I want to point something out to you though. If you look up at the top part of this, in the basic issue up in here, we are talking about color. There are two color controls here. They have nothing to do with exposure. They are just color. There's two of them. There's not three of them. There's no RGB up here. There are two sliders. One of them goes from blue to yellow. The other goes from green to magenta. What are these? Bingo. These are the A and B of LAB. Now, to be honest with you, they're not exactly the same. These coordinates are, if you imagine this is a perfect LAB like this, these are cocked a little bit. They're not an exact transition, but it's the same idea. And then what's exposure? L. All the work that you do here is done in LAB. This is not RGB. It's RGB when we get into Photoshop, but at this stage of the game, it isn't. And that's massive for us. Yes? Hang on one sec. We need to make sure that that is your user library. So go up to the Go menu, click, hold down the Option key, and come to the library, click on it, drag this over right next to the one that's already there. So it is that one. So click on library, scroll up to the top, we're looking under Application Support, right there. Down to Adobe. Okay, it's already where it needs to be, but you're going to turn this into me. So to turn it into me, drag a copy of it to your desktop. Pull down the options, you just took it out. Now you can't use it. So hit Command Z to undo that. You can drag again before you let go. Pull down the option key. See that little plus? Now down the higher key. So now you got a copy of here, copy of here. That's the one you turn in. That's okay. So application support, Adobe, Camera Raw. So click on this, drag it through. If you double click it, you want to. So go back to your binder. It should still be there. Click and drag this to your desktop. Hold down the option key before you let go. See this little plus? That way, and keep holding it down and now let go of your mouse. It makes a copy of it and keeps the original where it was, so that it works. What? Yeah, and so then double click on the CR2 file to launch it, to launch this thing back into Photoshop, back into Camera Raw. So anyway, I just wanted to point out, folks, that this is LAB is what's working right here. This is not an RGB system at all.
So I didn't get the part where you were go.
We need more aisles in this classroom.
So I know you did something with the DMP file, but I went down to this aisle.
That's fine. You don't want to have it anyway. So just double click on this here too. And you're exactly where you need to be. Okay. So we need to use this custom profile. Because what it does is it's going to remove the device dependency of this. It's going to pull our sensor out of the equation. To do it, if you take a look at the profile, if you click on the drop down, you can eventually get to it here. I don't use the drop down. I prefer actually the 4 little squares that are just to the right of the word that says profile. If you click on that, it will actually open up a screen and show you thumbnails of your profiles that you can actually then scroll down and look at. Now in my case, I've got one that says standard. There are different ones that you can actually have in here. What you want to do is you want to actually scroll down. There will be a thing that says profiles. If you actually open that up, inside of that, you should see the custom profiles that you have built for this image. Now, I don't want you to click on one of these yet. I just want you to hover over one and then hover back. So don't click on it yet. Just go forward and backward and forward and backward. When you are off the custom profile, this is what Adobe thinks your color should look like. I want you to pay special attention to her sweater. If you hover over the custom profile, look what happens to the color of that sweater. Did you know that sweater was off? How could you? There's no way to know. This kind of correction you cannot do visually. There's no way you'll know, oh, that sweater is just, it needs more saturation. I need to, what is the issue here? Is this working for everyone? Do not hit that profile yet. Caitlin. Yeah. Oh, what, there was a thumb. I thought there was a hand up. Okay, sorry. I want everybody to zoom into the color card itself. So just hover over the color card and click and come in. And again, do not select the custom profile yet. Just hover over it, go back and forth. And you can see specifically what's happening. If you look at the blue patches that are on the sort of in the middle 2 rows on the left-hand side, those are the ones that leap the most. And so what this is telling me, what it's doing is it's actually taking the blues of this image and making them darker. And what that tells me is the sensor in that particular camera of mine is too sensitive to blue. It's overreading blue, and that's one of the mistakes it's making. There's other ones that it's making in here, but that's the big glaring one that you can look at. And there's no way to know that. How do you color correct for that? There's no way you can't. So you started out, because you never did a profile for your cameras, you have a lie of color to begin with. It's an untruth of color. It's not the real color. And it's garbage in, garbage out. The minute you started, you had no choice. You had no chance. You'll never shoot this way again. Not if you care about your work. So people talk to me about this all the time, and they say, Verser, Jesus Christ, that is so much work. Or I shoot tethered, only tethered. When I go on location, I have got a laptop with me, and I'm shooting tethered, always. And people say to me, I can't believe you put in that much work, you do that. And I look at them and say, you lazy thing, fucking take this then and get out of my life. If you don't care about your work, then don't bother with this shit. Grab a really good iPhone and you're off to the races. Good luck liking what the iPhone will give you, but that's a different story. If you care about this, this is where you go.
Can you do this on Lightroom?
Yes. Works exactly the same. Those files are in exactly the right place for Lightroom. And the profile browser is identical. So at any rate, click on this. You've actually now taken care of the bias, but that doesn't mean our color is done yet. You still need to actually do color correction. We haven't done any white balance on this. So to do that, come up to the top right underneath the histogram where it says back arrow. If you click on that, it will get you out of the profile. You can actually see that the custom profile is sitting right here now, the whole one that we just named. If yours is not, you didn't pick it. Then click on the little white eyedropper for white balance and come over, and the white balance that I use on a target is this. So you want to avoid, when you do white balance, it's mislabeled. It should really just be neutral color balance. You don't want to click on the white patch to do a white balance. And the reason you don't want to do that is that this is going to put a color correction curve on this. And color correction curves are much more effective if you're working in the middle part of the curve instead of at either the highlight point or the shadow point. There's more room in the middle. So you pick mid-tone. A mid-tone gray is the best place to pick. Again, sometimes you'll click on the white patch. If you do click on the white patch, sometimes you'll get a warning and it'll just say, this patch is too light. We can't color balance on this. So at any rate, I always pick the patch, the gray that's right next to the red. That's the one that I go for. And if you click on that, you'll actually see the color of the image changes as well. This has now removed the bias of your sensor, and it has actually white balanced the image as well. The final thing to do is actually cover your cursor. Now that you've done both of these things, you need to do both of these first. Put your little eyedropper over the white patch, and what you are looking for is the readouts that are sitting up at the very top. You are looking for these readouts right here, these RGB readouts. You do not get those in Lightroom. The reason you don't get this information, this readout information in Lightroom, is because you have not picked a destination color space in Lightroom. When you're in Lightroom, it's all raw all the time, and until you tell it at some point, I'm going to put this into Adobe RGB, or I'm going to put this into sRGB. It has no reference. It can't give you those numbers because it doesn't know what that space is that you're going to put it into. Small pause. I need everybody to come back here on this back wall. Again, you won't see this on the video. Okay. I need to explain what this is, and I need to get your opinion. So, this is a synthetic print. So I've created all these unnecessary shots. It's not a year, so that's real. This is a grayscale ramp on the bottom. So it starts, you can see the values that are on the top. It starts with 0, 0, 0, and it's pure black. Then it's a 3, 2, 3, almost pure black. 6, 6, 6, so almost pure black. By the time we get up into the 20s, we're getting up into deep shadowy black. This is where this is going, right? Then I start on the lower row down here. Again, it keeps going up by groups of 3. Because I did it just one at a time, maybe I'll just go for it. So it's jumping up from 4s, from 7s, all the way up to 4, 5s. Does that make sense what's going on here? On this bottom row down here, it's the same idea. This is though in the highlights. It's starting at 234s to 337, and it's just getting lighter and lighter and lighter all the way up to 255 is right here. Does that make sense? On top of this, there's the letter D, obviously. My name is overnight. I feel like I own it. I mean, my name is so fucking weird. I feel like, okay, right? Everything is, you know, it's going to be everything now, right? D magazine, you know. Anyway, it was just an obvious. So, the D on all of this, there's one in every single one of these in the center, and it's jet black. It's always black. It's always 0, 0, 0. The flip side on the lighter ones is that the D is always white, pure white. So my question to you is this. What we're trying to do is use this target to establish shadow detail. So, a lot of people confuse shadow detail with black point. There can be things in your image that are darker than shadows than what would be detail in the shadow, right? So you guys are looking at me right now, pretty bright light. Obviously, black shirt, whatever. There's some, you know, there's detail clearly should be in this, right? But if I hold my hand over my armpit and throw in a shadow up here, whatever, it starts to get a whole lot darker to see. The question is that in your print, do you need to see that as detail or should that be black? That's an artistic decision, not one I can actually play out for you here. But my question is, where in this range can you really see the B? So do not look at this and say, well, yeah, if I get up here and I hold a flashlight like this and I put my face in here really closely, I can take a B out at the 15. That is not shadow detail. Shadow detail is when you're looking at a print, going through a book, something nice on the wall, whatever. Where is the shadow details? Where can you really fundamentally see it? Don't go too far, but where? Anyway. We have 27, 24, 21. Okay. I'm right where you guys are. For me, my standard is somewhere around the mid-20s. That's pretty much where I ultimately go. So, but we're talking about in this area right in here. We're not going overboard. This is blatant. But we're not also getting down into here where there's no really shadow detail in there. Could have discriminated, yes, but there's really nothing there, right? Gives me a shadow point. We need to do the same thing for our highlights. So, where do you really distinctly start to see the B? Again, start at the lightest and work your way back. I'm sorry, what? 246. Did we get a sort of feeling good about that? Okay, so that's where shadow detail, highlight detail is. Right? So 25 and 246. We good? So, on my little color card, this little white patch on here is real. It's a real thing. It has texture. It's not page white. This should not be 255. That would be overexposed because this is a real thing. If I photographed this thing and printed it out, I cropped out everything else but this little white patch, it should register on my page white. On my print, you should be able to see this thing. It needs to have detail in it. Does that make sense, everyone? The biggest mistake you can make is to think this should be white. It should not. This thing should actually have detail in it. Highlight detail. It should be very close to white, but it should have highlight detail. What is the number that we just picked back there for highlight detail? 246. What are the numbers for the value that you're reading right here? That's why. Perfect exposure. I now have perfect color because I built a profile with this. I have perfectly neutral color because I color balanced using this. And I use this to set perfect exposure. I go in, I shoot tethered with this card. I do this in Capture One, but you could do it here in Camera Raw. You cannot do it in Lightroom because you do not get values. You do not get RGB readout values in Lightroom. You get percentages. But I go in there and I measure this, and as long as this little white patch is between 245 and 250, that's my range in here, then I know I have perfect exposure. I'm exposing as far to the right as I can, meaning I'm exposing as much as I can before I start to truly overexpose and lose information because I've overexposed it. Does that make sense to all of you? What you need to think about what we're doing here in exposure is we are capturing data. We are not making a final image. If I want this image to be really dark and moody, I shoot it just like this because that gives me the maximum data to build an image, and then I just use exposure here and crank it way down and make it dark and moody. That's how come I never end up with noise in my images, because you need data. Does this make sense, everyone? So it's a 3-4 I've got going right here. I know my exposure is right where it needs to be. The final thing that I would do in this is say to yourself, I'm looking at the shadow that's actually on her arm right here. And I need to ask myself, by the way, you can't pick shadow using these patches. This black patch here will never be a shadow value for you, so don't even try to use it. But looking at this image, I'm going to zoom back out just a little bit. What should be shadow detail in here? Where am I looking at this that should have shadow detail in here? Well, I'm going to zip in right underneath her boob, and I feel like this area right in here should definitely have shadow detail in here. And if you take a look at my read up in here, I see it's actually saying, okay, well, we're 8, 8, and 11 here. Where do I need to be to have shadow detail? Exactly. Isn't that what we all just decided sitting back there, mid-20s? So I can actually take a color dropper and put a point right here, and I'm getting 15, 15, whatever. I'm just going to come over to my exposure slider and I'm going to pop that guy up. I could also open up my shadows a little bit and possibly my blacks a little bit and hit it a little bit more exposure. Close enough for me. Recheck my color card right here. It's a 251. So I'm really trying to balance these two things against each other. I'm going to take that down to exactly a half a stop more, and then I'll just open up the shadows a little bit more here. My image is done. Done. Done, done, done. Does this make sense, what we're talking about here? Are we good on this part? At this stage of the game, you now need to create your next DNG, and here's the reason. This color profile that we've actually put in here right now, the color one, the custom one that you made, it's on the computer that you're using right now. However, if you were to save this file, just go ahead and create a file, or take this CR2, do whatever you're going to do with it to another computer that did not have that custom profile on it. When you actually then bring it into Photoshop, it will know that there's a missing profile. It will know that you had done a custom profile, that it'll put up a warning sign and it'll say to you the profile can't be located because it's not on the computer that you moved it to. However, if we save this as a DNG now, it embeds this profile into the DNG, and then this DNG becomes our new root, our new starting up. We don't use the CR2 anymore. We use the DNG that's got the custom profile embedded in it. Make sense? To show you, because I really need to bang this one home, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to save this as a DNG. Again, to do it, it's the drop-down menu. Sorry, not the drop-down menu. It's the little box at the very top with the arrow pointing down. Click on that. Go ahead and say save. It's going to save that DNG right next to your CR2 file. I'm going to hit done. I'm going to go back to my Finder. you can now see that you've got a CR2, you've got a DNG, and this XMP is just the sidecar file for how we processed it. So it's holding the information about that 0.5 exposure bump that we did, the opening up of the shadows, all of that information is it's just written into this text file. However, I'm going to go now to my library and find that custom profile that I built. So again, library, application support, Adobe, camera raw, profiles, and I am going to throw, I've got two of them for the same thing, and I don't know which one I use, but I'm going to get rid of them both. So those are both gone. I'm going to go back to my CR2 file now, and I'm going to double click it. It comes into Camera Raw, and this is exactly what I was talking about. Because I removed that profile from my system, it knows that there's supposed to be one, but it can't find it. Make sense? However, I'm going to cancel here. If I do the DNG, same thing, and the profile is right there. So this is my starting point. I've done all of this work to build a new raw file. Questions about this? So I get this all the time. There is a gross underestimation of the talent and ability and intellect of every single one of you, and I reject it out of hand. This is deep shit. Nobody knows this stuff. This is taking you guys to a whole nother place, and every single person in this classroom is going to understand this, use this, build on this. Imagine being a photo assistant, trying to get a job, walking into a photo studio and saying to the photographer right out of the bat, "Would you like me to profile your cameras before we start shooting today?" What? You know, you can profile your cameras to do, you know, really, really deep color correction. What? Photographers are dumb as shit. You guys are not going to be that kind of photographer, if I have anything to say about it. Yes? So did you get to the point where you made the DNG again?
Yeah.
Fine. If you open up your CR2 copy right now,
Okay.
not the DNG, but the CR2, you should get a warning sign right up in the profile part. Is there a little warning triangle that says you can't? Well, you haven't thrown away the profile from your system yet.
I didn't get it.
Yeah, well, that's because you haven't thrown the profile away out of your system yet. It's your the profile that you're using is still in your system.
Okay.
But if you put that onto a hard drive and open it up onto the Macintosh, the computer right next to it,
Yeah.
that profile won't exist on that computer, so you'll get that warning. That's why you build another DNG of it, because the DNG will embed that custom profile.
Okay. So what do I do with that DNG then?
That becomes what you start any file work that you're going to do with.
Okay.
Yes?
I just want to make sure I understand. So basically, since we moved the profile towards the camera,
Right.
this is for any photo taken with that camera.
Any photo taken with that camera under that lighting. Okay, but wait, but there's a caveat here in that. Under that lighting. However, that profile will work 95% of the way for any lighting that you do with that camera, but not that camera model. So if you have two identical cameras, those profiles are not interchangeable. But that same model, because what it's really doing is trying to take care of the bias of the sensor. And the sensor is going to be biased no matter what lighting you're shooting under. However, light can have an impact on how bad that bias can actually be. So in a perfect world, you would do it for every shooting that you're doing with that camera under a specific lighting. I do this, I go out, I shoot a typical, the most I'll do is 4 or 5 different lighting setups in a day. I can bang this out, all 4 or 5 of those custom profiles, I can bang this out in 10 minutes, tops, 5 if I'm really impatient. And then I just have them. Okay, are we good on this part? Yes.
So the other thing
Again, you didn't throw away the original one that I asked you to throw away. So look at the information on that side, the oldest one, and throw that one away. The new one is the one you want to work with. Okay. Woo. Let me see where we're at right now, guys. Might be a good time for a break, but we got a lot to get through today. It's 3:20, let's do a hard 10, because we're jumping into something even more challenging, possibly. So 3:30. Yes. It doesn't matter. You're not going to use it. This isn't your homework. You're going to be doing the same process for your homework, but not this image. You don't need any of these files.